Hey, it's Chase from On the Table Gaming, and welcome back to another episode of the On the Table Gaming podcast. And this week, we'll be looking at the Visions in the Flame, Article 11, focusing on the House Targaryen forces. As always, we're thankful to be joined by game designer Michael Shinall, and special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters who make this podcast possible. Be sure to head on over to the newly formed On the Table Gaming Facebook group to share your hobby pictures, talk board games, card games, and tabletop war games, and generally help us build a positive community. With that being said, let's jump on in talking about the mighty Targaryen forces as previewed in the 2021 update. All right. Well, Michael, thank you so much for coming back on. And we get to talk about Targaryens this week. But before we do that, let's take a look at some of the images that people submitted on the Table Gaming Facebook page of their painted neutrals, which is our topic of last week. Were there any there that caught your eye?
There were two artists specifically whose stuff I really liked in the thread. Not that there weren't a bunch of talented ones there, but there were two that definitely jumped out at me. First one being the Flademan by Grant Stacy.
Oh, those are fantastic. Yeah.
The other one that caught my attention here was we had the unit of Bloody Mummer Skirmishers here done by Darren Calvagno.
He also had a great Blackguard unit. Did you happen to see the one by Stephen Bassler? It was a beautifully painted set of Flademen with an interesting shirt behind it.
Didn't notice any shirt, but yes, I did notice the Flademen. I mean, they are perhaps one of my favorite aesthetic units in the game.
So they drew your attention to them. They were so beautiful. Oh, man. Okay. Philou Tremblay had a unit of Bastards Girls that looked beautiful with a bunch of dogs and some snow on there. So thank you guys so much for submitting. And for next week, we'll have a challenge for submitting some of your images then as well for the designer developer to take a look at. And with that being said, let's jump in here and start talking about the main focus here being the Targaryens. So we got a pretty amazing article here. Targaryens look like to be really strong. So with House Targaryens, diversity is kind of one of their strengths. Can you maybe elaborate on how their diversity, of the wide range of people they bring together, is kind of being addressed and touched on in this 2021 update?
When it comes to the Targaryens, you said diversity, and that's true in just a number of ways because, so as I touched upon in the article, you have the great houses of Westeros. And despite the fact that they're made up of different liege lords, different sub-houses and everything, they all kind of function as their own, I don't want to say mini country, but they have an ideology about them. The Starks, they all represent the Northerners. So, even if it's not they don't necessarily follow the king in the North, they follow the Northern traditions in some capacity. Umbers, Karstarks, Reeds, proper Starks, they're all part of the North. The Lannisters are a bit more of a hodgepodge, but at the end of the day, their forces are kind of driven by money and the fact that they're the better Southerners and everything like that. Baratheons are, the Stormlanders. Or Dragonstone, they all have a culture to them. When it comes to House Targaryen and Daenerys, though, she basically is this just hodgepodge of people that have come under her banner for one reason or another. Whether they're Westerosi loyalists, whether they're Essos sellswords, or just the people that she's freed, or people who are just basically don't have anywhere else to go. She's kind of attracted all of the kind of the lost and the vagrants of the world under her banner.
And so we see in the updated tactics cards that there is a kind of a universal theme coming on here. And a lot of it actually seems to do with movement and maneuvering. We kind of see how that first cluster that you talk about, overrun, sudden retreat, swift position. How do you see this kind of playing into the Targaryen faction identity? Or why is it so important to their troops that they have?
Well, so mobility is a key element, regardless of which commander you're choosing in the Targaryens. That's one of the core themes of their faction, because Daenerys started with the Dothraki, and she's basically amassing this big army to go and set sail across the sea back to Westeros and reclaim her throne, that she thinks that she's entitled to. So that kind of mobility aspect of, you have Daenerys, who is basically kind of traveling around the world, sort of, or at least pulling attention from around the world. That was where that theme of kind of maneuverability and whatnot came with, and also heavily influenced by the fact that the majority of her early forces are based on the Dothraki, so lots of cavalry. But that is one of the core themes to the Targaryens, is that mobility aspect. So almost regardless of which commander you're taking, you're going to have some battlefield control kind of shenanigans. And that's actually a better way, I think, of putting it, rather than just straight mobility, is more battlefield control via positioning.
And that makes sense. And she's got some, although maybe Dany herself may not be the most seasoned warrior, she does certainly have many people who are experienced in the ways of battle and maneuvering themselves in the battlefield and the other tactics that go with that. So we see cards like Overrun, Sudden Retreat, Swift Reposition. So lots of tweaks there, and in some cases even replacing older cards. Out of those three, which of those kind of stands out to you the most as one of your more favorite tactics cards?
Well, I know that like Fabio's like favorite card in the entire game is Overrun, which by the way, Chase, if you've seen him at any point, you just let me know. He's kind of been missing for quite a while, presumed dead, but we might have to get a new one. But anyway, point is that like Overrun, because it's a momentum swing card, you're able to get the assault in, destroy a unit, and then carry that over into another one. Now, this is a toned down version from what it was in the 1.6 versions, because as you see, it doesn't allow the pivot beforehand. So it does require additional setup. But that's just, again, kind of plays in with the general toning down of most of the tactics cards and the type of buffs they bring. Free actions are a bit rare, and you have to do a little bit more to earn them. And that's doubly so charges, because charges by their nature are already one of the most impactful things that can happen in the entire game.
Absolutely. And so, we kind of have those three clumped together as sort of your movement and maneuver zone dependent cards, or they have kickers that might benefit from that. Then we start to get down into some of the really more flavorful ones. Fury of the Dragon, for example, is gone, but now we have field control. You never want to face a Targaryen horde on an open field, and they certainly seem to be able to control the field with this card. I'm noticing that they actually have some interplay now with NCUs, right? Where when an NCU claims the maneuver zone, in this case, or field control, if the NCU is friendly, you may replace that zone's effect with a friendly combat unit performs one maneuver or retreat action with +1 movement, and the enemy it disengages from becomes weakened. However, you can play this when any NCU claims a zone on a tactics board, so not just your own. It can be reactive in that regard as well. If the NCU was your enemy, you now get to force your opponent to replace that zone's effect with one friendly combat unit becomes weakened, and they may shift 3 inches. So you actually get to weaken an opponent, and then maybe they get as a drawback, they can move their unit 3 inches away or kind of reposition them a little bit. What's the thought behind that card? What is that kind of capturing?
So in this one here, the maneuver zone is paramount to the Targaryen core deck. And this is basically giving you a little advantage here to like punish the opponent for taking the zone that really, really matters to you. Now, one thing here, I can foresee this one already, that some people will probably play this one wrong. And then the important rule here to remember is that friendly is always referencing to like the player with the effect. Because I can see some people going like, oh, I get to pick one of my guys, or you're going to pick one of my guys and they're going to get to shift and weaken. No, this is the opponent's choosing one of their guys. They're becoming weakened. They're getting to shift. So effectively, they're getting still targeted by the maneuver zone, and which would usually grant them a free maneuver or retreat. But here it's now a much drastically weaker effect. And on top of that, the weakened token.
Right. Yeah. So when it's the NCUs, your opponent's playing the turn. So they would be the one reading that text on the zone, right? They are the friendly combat.
That's just something that I can see potentially some people getting tripped up over. But remember, friendly is always in reference to who the effect is talking about.
And then we have some really cool ones with like Unstoppable Advance, where now the way that works is it doesn't only ignore dangerous, hindering, the rough keywords, but you also destroy any terrain with a destructible keyword that is moved through or ended within 1 inch of. You also give a bonus to search forth if necessary as well. So we start to see a lot more interplay with terrain here.
Yeah, that's actually probably one of my favorite like newer cards, just because of the reasons you mentioned with the interplay with terrain. Because the setting up the battlefield is important, and obviously if you have a battlefield kind of control army, then that can be a big hamper for you. And especially with cavalry, yes, they're maneuverable, but the right pieces of terrain can really shut them down. But here, okay, so now you've got a something to go against that.
So you got your spike walls up or something, and they don't care. Dothraki don't care. They're unstoppable. Out of all these ones, we see kind of some changes slightly to things like Fire and Blood. So you still get your choices, but now there's 3 choices to choose from. And if you control the maneuver zone, you get to choose 2 instead. The extra choices are always appreciated, but now, especially with that unit may reroll any charge distance die this turn, you can basically kind of guarantee you're going to get that charge off like as a sure thing.
Well, there's never any sure things, but this is just another element of the kind of the mobility and again, I keep saying it over and over, but the battlefield control elements. So you've got ones that help you, give you extra like little movement tricks like overrun or sudden retreat. You've got ones that help you shape the battlefield, which I would consider like swift reposition in that category. You've got field control. And then you have the ones that are just going to give you some additional bonuses for charging, which is again another form of maneuvering around. And that's what this falls into.
And then as we're just going through these tactics cards, let's just hit this last one here. Blood of the Dragon. So start of any turn, you can target one friendly combat unit and attach this card to them. So a cool card attach effect. When a friendly unit is destroyed, place one order token on this card. While this card has a token, the attached unit's melee attacks gain +1 die, and this unit suffers -1 wound from failing panic tests. So this is a really cool card in that it seems like, as you start to lose your troops, and your troops are a little bit more pricey in some cases for Targaryens, you can actually have that be benefiting your remaining troops, and that maybe now that they're bloodied and ready for to go out for that hunt, they can do additional damage.
Yeah, so with the Targaryens, they've kind of developed this reputation as being a very elite faction based on the units that were available to them at the time of, I guess even at the time of this recording. Which is true. They do have a lot of expensive options, but there are some cheaper options on the horizon that will be coming out shortly in Q1, Q2 this year that, are going to just give them some more options that you have. So as I've said in the article, you're going to be able to take your elite guys, make them even more elite via this card, or take some of your like weaker kind of chafed guys and give them a little bit of a boost, because +1 attack die is a rare effect to have, and just having it around is super nice. And the -1 wound from failing panic test is a fairly substantial boost in sustain, because since panic is reduced to D3, this is effectively cutting your wounds out of here by 33%, giving you the capability here of also just suffering no wounds from failing panic tests.
Fantastic. So, the basic deck here is pretty amazing. Obviously, right now, like thinking in the context of like a Dothraki horde, all this stuff looks fantastic and really fun to play with. However, as you show in this article, it seems that Targaryens aren't really not just about their base tactics deck, of course, but the commanders and their influence on the tactics that are being used is kind of one of the bigger deals about Targaryen right now. So their commanders come with 4 tactics cards instead of the standard 3, and then it replaces a tactics card in the main deck. Now, you showed us Khal Drogo here. Before we jump into him and his tactics cards, he replaces one of the base tactics cards with one of his special cards. Does every commander replace a different card, or like do they always replace the same Targaryen card in the main deck?
No, they all have a card that they replace specifically. There are some that replace the same card, but it's not like every single time this card is just going to get replaced. Otherwise, it would just literally be a filler card. It's reflective of their personalities. So like Khal Drogo here, he replaces sudden retreat, namely because he's the great Khal who don't retreat. He might tactically reposition himself, right. But he is too busy killing.
Tactical reposition in the other direction. It's just
right. And just to give some I guess some additional spoilers, and thing is, this is going off of memory, but I believe Barristan Selmy, who favorite character in the setting, I believe he actually replaces Overrun because being the more of a tank/bunker style commander, that one is, he gets rid of that one because it's a little kind of bloodlusty, kind of aggressive for his playstyle. So he switches that out for one of his personal cards. That I'm definitely not gonna get into that spoilers there. You just have to wait and see.
Fair enough. Oh, well, wait with bated breath on him though. Oh man, he's one of my favorite characters too.
But so this was with the refocus on commanders. They all have their own unique play style, and the card that they replace was specifically chosen to be reflective of not only their character, but also the tactics and game mechanics that they're bringing to the table.
And Khal Drogo himself, he's substantial changes as well. He's got Expert Duelist now, where each time he performs a melee attack, you get to choose to either do an additional wound or to target one infantry unit in the defender's unit and roll a die on a 3+, you destroy that attachment. That's fantastic. And he's got Iron Resolve, where he's getting a bonus to his panic tests and suffering less wounds. So if he's in a unit and you've also got your Blood of the Dragon on him, that's a pretty non-scarable unit.
Oh yeah, he can absolutely make his unit just this juggernaut on the battle, which is good because to compensate for that, because a lot of the Dothraki units that you would put him in, they don't necessarily have the best defensive stats out there. And you could always do something and just stick him in some Flademen, for example, if you want a really big tank unit. But then you're going to get some cost up there, and it's still a good option. The thing about Khal Drogo here is that he actually received an unintentional rework. His kit that he previously had worked really well and it was fine. It's just that because of the changes to everything else, he had to be redesigned because he had too much overlap with the way we redesigned other units and tactics cards. This was kind of one of those situations where it's like, he wasn't changed because we felt he was overpowered or underpowered or anything like that. This change really came about as a byproduct of other little ripple effect changes.
Yeah.
And, that's just something that can happen.
And he's got to be the great Khal. He can't just be giving out vulnerable in the charge like some chump screamer or something. He's got to be the great one.
We did push him in the direction of, he is one of those categories of battlefield commander where his unit is going to be like one of those stars of the battlefield. And I know we've showcased a lot of these, but that's because a lot of the fan favorite characters are just this type of personality, where we have like Jaime Lannister, one of the Baratheon guys, I forget exactly which one, and then Khal Drogo here. Like, these are effectively your battlefield rock stars. Okay, like if they're on the battlefield, it's a big deal. Versus like Tyrion Lannister. If you see him on the battlefield, no one's going to sit there and go like, oh, the great warrior Tyrion Lannister is taken to the battlefield with his half axe. No, they're going to underestimate him and go like, oh, the half man is over there. That's not going to draw the same type of attention that, like Jaime Lannister is, taking the vanguard here. Okay, we need to be worried.
And then there was a disclaimer in your article, and I just wanted to give you the opportunity here to apologize that you basically ruined the books for some people here by revealing that Khal Drogo may be dead. So, we'll just leave it there.
I'm really sorry that unfortunately Aquaman gets suffocated with a pillow. And
you're that guy. I see how it is. So we were walking to the movies and you're like, oh yeah, Titanic, the boat sinks. And it's like, oh gee, thanks.
Guys, I really can't believe that Anakin Skywalker is Darth Vader.
Passion of the Christ, you won't believe. Well, anyhow, moving on. We've got this Khal Drogo character. He looks awesome. He's got 4 cards now. So ride by attack. We see that moving to auto wounds instead of resolving a charge attack. Any thoughts behind why that change occurred?
A lot of the changes on this card here were just to streamline things. And frankly, the full attack action had the potential to like snowball a little bit more than we wanted it to. And here, while it is straight wounds, it is toned down much more compared to what it was. Because here you're going to cap out at like 4 wounds. And that's assuming that you're engaged with like a full rank infantry unit. So you'll be able to clear off one of their ranks and march through them. That's really the kind of the bigger aspect of this card is the repositioning, allowing you to crash into an enemy's front line and then later push through their line and actually get in their rear and in their flanks.
I'm looking forward to you busting this one out in your rematch with Fabio at some point here with a great Khal in the 2021 version.
Well, as I said, he's strangely enough and coincidentally gone missing. So
he's probably somewhere like training in the mountains, like, lifting logs and pushing trays of miniatures back and forth with like a montage going in the background. But I don't know.
Yeah. That's what's happening.
Somewhere out far beyond the wall, perhaps. So what about assault orders here? So you get to replace an NCU zone with another combat unit performs an attack action, or Khal Drogo gets a charge action. That's kind of his replacement card for the base deck. And so what kind of flavor does that bring for him as a character? And how do you see that kind of like solidifying that identity?
So one thing I actually do want to state, and this is something that even myself, I kind of have a mental schism about, is that the card that is being replaced in the deck, this is just a common thing that you look at the card that like is replacing and the card that is being replaced, and you start trying to like compare them against each other. But that's doesn't actually how that works, because like the card that's being replaced, like it doesn't actually like have any difference. Like you're taking these 4 cards and you're replacing one of these other 7 cards with them. And I'll be honest, the reason it got replaced is probably because it had less text on the card than the others.
Okay, that's good reference though for us to understand then. So it's not about being like, this is his special card. It's just that he has 4 cards and this happens to be the one that replaces one in the deck.
Yeah, and I will admit, like that is something that even myself, like when we were laying out the cards and designing them, we would go like, okay, well, like, Drogo's card is obviously Addravt. So yes, that's the one that needs to replace something in the deck. But then you're like, but there's way too much text on that card to actually sit in another line. And then you come to the fact that like, there's no reason it has to be that card. You're still replacing the cards out. Just this one doesn't like it. And it's a purely like a bit of a mental like fluff thing. And it's strange because I still do it. But it was actually Fabio that pointed out of like, what does the card that's being switched out matter? Because we're just taking one card out and putting in 4. Like you're right. From every perspective, it doesn't actually matter like which card has the text of removing a card.
And those are his last words. Is that what? Hashtag where's Fabio?
I cannot confirm or deny that or anything. But yeah, so fun fact there, and that's something that I foresee happening a lot when people are like analyzing the commanders. Is they're going to get into like a conversation about like, well, Assault Orders is replacing Sudden Retreat, and are those cards like you're losing this one in favor of the other one? And it's like, well, that's not actually true though. You're not. That's not a one. If those are the only cards that were being replaced, then that would be one thing. But the fact that this is 4 commander tactics cards that's being added to the deck, and just one is being taken out. And yeah, it's that weird mental thing. Because even now I'm explaining it to you, and it still doesn't like. I'm still like, that's not true. Like, yes, it is.
Well, I mean, out of his Ride by Attack, Assault Orders, Lead by Example, which is so cool as well. Assault Orders, Addravt, that is like kind of the King of Kings card there. That one, I think, if I had to pick one, it seems like would be the most Khal Drogo. And you already mentioned him and this card. But so this one kind of just like talk about like changing the way we think of the game, or maybe especially the way you play the game. So when Khal Drogo's unit activates, he gets to pick an enemy in long range, and for the round, this card gets attached to him for the entire round. When your other Dothraki forces, or I guess really any Targaryen forces, attack that unit, they gain critical blow, and if they kill it, you get a victory point. If at the end of the round, if that card's been removed or that enemy's not been destroyed, your opponent gains that victory point. So there's like a little bit of a super high risk reward, or if you kind of chicken out and don't want to play it, start a friendly turn, you can just discard it and draw another tactics card. But wow, this really opens up a lot of these scenarios and gameplays, and that you can steal some victory points off an unsuspecting or unprepared opponent.
So yeah, this is an element that you'll actually see in some of the commander tactics cards. It's not true of every commander in Targaryens, but a lot of them is that one of their cards is going to give you additional methods of generating victory points in exchange for some criteria. But if that criteria is not met, or the inverse of it happens, your opponent can potentially get those points from you instead. And so here, with like Khal Drogo, you have one where he's declaring a unit like, we're going to kill those guys, and if you destroy them, you get an additional victory point. If you don't, however, though, and they manage to survive that onslaught until the end of the round, then your opponent gets the victory point, because basically your entire army just saw Khal Drogo yell out, a kill command, and then no one was able to fulfill that order. So, everyone's just now demoralized and like, oh man, that's not good.
But you got to always be watching for that now. You can't sleep on Khal Drogo. You got to pay attention to where he is. If you got a unit getting low and you're within long range, then you got to be watching out.
Yeah, and again, these effects not every Targaryen commander has an effect like this, but most of them do. Like Jorah is the other commander that immediately comes to my mind. His card that he has is Betrayal, and that one is when a NCU claims a zone, you can replace the zone's effect with oh, Chase, you sly dog, you almost caught me giving more spoilers.
It was just Valentine's Day. Come on, think of Jorah here.
Yeah, sorry, Sir Friendzone will have to wait for his full reveal, I guess.
Son of a gun. All right. I'm gonna try it. We'll see if so many other hidden traps can be set here. But I think that's a cool card, and the fun thing about it is, I think I'm interested to see people's initial reactions, because I think people are gonna be like, oh, it's like overpowered, or oh, it's underpowered. It's gonna be a lot of debate, I think, because if your opponent has this card, you're playing into Khal Drogo, so now you can start to bait situations where maybe Khal Drogo, you activate a unit and Khal Drogo drops it on it, and now you can protect that unit with other tactics cards or other things that maybe let you reposition it out of the way and kind of trick your opponent into giving up a victory point if they play it poorly. So to be a good Khal Drogo commander, you got to really know how to fight and how to make sure that your troops are able to get in position to capitalize on cards like that. I just think that's really, really cool.
Okay. I kind of feel a little bad about like not revealing the whole like betrayal text. Like basically that was a bit of a tease there. That was a little bit of an unjust tease. And then you go like, oh, it's Valentine's Day. And it's like, oh, I kind of feel, oh, there's like this little tinge in my chest here. Like
those are called feelings.
I don't like it. So anyway, I guess one of the effects there I'll talk about is Barristan Selmy's card, because let's talk about a character that's actually, cool, right? Ooh, yeah, I'm sure there's some. I can already feel the Jorah fans out there that were just like immediately furiously typing on the keyboards.
I don't want to be mean, but I'm not sure the Jorah fan base is quite as large as some of the other fan bases. So I think we'll be good for now on this one, just this one.
Okay, so I will go ahead and give this a on the table exclusive here. With Barristan Selmy, one of his cards is Legendary Boldness. Now, as I mentioned before, Barristan is your kind of bunker slash kind of tanky commander. And so his card here is Start of the Round. Target Barristan Selmy's unit and attach this card to them until the end of the round. Again, another guy who is focusing on himself like he's a legendary figure on the battlefield. Really cool in his Queen's Guard dragon armor. Anyway, while attached, when the unit passes a panic test, all enemies in short range become panicked. So you're getting this immediate buff.
Man.
But if his unit is destroyed that round, your opponent's gaining an additional victory point. But if he manages to make it to the end of the round and is engaged, then you score a victory point.
Oh, man.
This is a prime card for if you're on an objective and you play this card down, like Barristan is, going Legendary Boldness, it's going on, his unit. Now, of course, it has to target him. And just basically this is the legendary Barristan Selmy, formerly of the King's Guard, now of the Queen's Guard, advisor to the dragon. He's yelling, "Come at me, bros." Because that's obviously that's a quote from the books, right?
I think so. It must be, yeah. And the new one coming out soon. Yeah.
Okay, now, your opponent can go after him if he wants. And if he does, he's worth extra victory points. But if he fails to destroy him and the end of the round happens and Barristan is engaged, then you get the extra victory point. This also has the inverse effect where it might cause opponents to want to get away from you because they're like, oh man, I can't take his unit down because he's bunkered up in a bunch of Unsullied or something. Let me retreat out of combat here to steal away that kind of glory that he has. So he doesn't get to have that rallying effect on his troops and get that extra victory points.
Oh man, that adds a whole new dimension to the game too, as things you want to watch out for. So you got to play the scenario, but then you also got to play the Targaryen commander because each one of these guys comes in with their own little quirk that you got to be ready for. That's really going to make it fascinating too in two list formats and how you build and pair certain commanders. And maybe you do want a Khal Drogo and a Barristan going together as your forces over maybe a Jorah or even maybe a Daenerys Targaryen because they might synergize better with your kind of flex options here when you get on the table.
Oh yeah, the 2-list format is definitely going to be interesting with Targaryens specifically, given the diversity that they have access to.
Man, that's fantastic. Let's talk about some of these cool units that we've got here then too. So you made some, maybe we'll start off with Screamers. We'll work our way up in order of seniority, I guess. We'll get ourselves to these veterans at the end here. But so starting off with the Dothraki Screamers, so we see some baseline changes to them. So now they have a Furious Charge. So enemies successfully charged by this unit become vulnerable. We also see an increase in their morale. These guys look great. And I think, they're still a pretty good unit for a 6-point unit here. And it looks like you're going to be a lot of synergies with the Tactics cards. I can already see myself kind of burning through a lot of cards from Khal Drogo or the base Targaryen Tactics to kind of up their damage or keep them, being really potent. You get your starter set. This is kind of your bread and butter unit that you're going to be having in your force if you're starting out, especially. So, you added Furious Charge here, and these guys already have a 3+ to hit. What was kind of the thought behind that?
So when you look at these guys in the new 2021 kind of, I don't want to say meta because it hasn't even come out yet, but being 6 points, they're already cavalry. So they're getting the extra maneuverability based on that. And they're also a very fast cavalry at 6 speed. In addition to that, they've got a very impressive morale of 5+. Their defenses, their weak point at only a 5+. But if you look at what they have for 6 points, you are bringing a 3+ to hit, which does carry a lot of weight, especially moving into 2021. You have a very fast speed here of being a combination of cavalry and just the natural speed 6. And then you have the ability to really hit hard in the charge, given vulnerable. Now, vulnerable is just going to make the damage you deal more, I don't want to say predictable, more consistent. Because you're still capping out at 7 dice here at full with rerolls for the charge, and the 3+ means you're probably going to land a lot of hits. But other than that, they don't have any special keywords or anything going with them. And so, you're basically just relying on your flank bonuses or your rear bonuses. You're relying on that positioning to come through. But these guys will still kind of suffer against some of the more, let's say tougher units like your Lannister Guardsmen or really anything rocking a 3+ defense. Even hitting them in the flanks, your actual damage is going to be a little bit low because of the lack of keywords, unless you throw some attachments or something like that in them. So Furious Charge is going to let you use that speed to your advantage. Now, with the Dothraki here specifically, they don't want to get bogged down in combat. That's where they're going to start suffering. Unless you build around that via some of their attachment options, such as the Screamer Co. gives you martial training, which allows you to basically consistently keep putting down vulnerable for those prolonged engagements. So being able to synergize out your unit here, so okay, I'm up against a grindy army like Baratheons, hitting them hard. I don't really have to worry about hitting them first because I know I'm going to do that. I'm already faster than them. But it's when I start getting stuck in combat. Now I've got to start planning around that. So this is going to give you those options there.
And also at 6 points, we got the Dothraki Outriders, and they've seen significant changes as well. First off, talking about the stat changes. So now their Outrider bow can not only shoot at short range, but if they don't perform their maneuver, they can shoot at long range. Now we can kind of see them kind of perform a more versatile role at the cost of losing nimble, right? So they're not kind of up there in the flanks as much harassing, although they certainly could be. They can kind of reach out and touch their opponents at a greater range now. They've also gained a melee attack with their Outrider's blade. They've got a little bit more armor, a little bit more morale. What was the thought between giving them a long range attack?
Well, so as you can see, these guys are the flip side of the coin to the Screamers. Screamers want to get in melee. They want to, that's where they're happiest. Outriders want to avoid that really at all costs.
Kind of makes sense that you gave vulnerable now to the Screamers, right? Because that's they're specialized into that now.
Yeah, they're going to, shake up the opponent, and, if they're Screamers, it's a bunch of Dothraki, bloodthirsty horse lords charging into you. You're going to be a little vulnerable from that. But the Outriders here can kind of fill that dual role of hanging back, plinking and softening up your targets for the rest of your units. And then also they're good objective campers because, yes, they're cavalry. They only have 2 ranks, but they can get those those flank objectives or the ones that no one else is really paying attention to and still have a long threat range because you can switch their bows onto long range, which is usually a place that, objective camping is not something you want your cavalry to be doing usually because you're wasting the mobility that you're getting from cavalry. But here with the Outriders, it's not so bad because, okay, you're basically trading your ability to be cavalry to turn into long-range archers.
Yeah. The other thing I kind of was wondering about this, and I don't know if you can speak to this, but on the old card for the 1.5 edition, you had nimble, you had the short bow. There's not a lot of room left on that card. And now you have that the range icon moved over there. And I think we might see this a little bit more clearly with the Dothraki Veterans. Did you find ever that in changing the design of cards, that sometimes that impacts your ability to design units? Are those ever at all linked?
Well, it was actually initially a design thing that we did way back at the start of the game, was that we wanted so that units only ever had a maximum of 3 abilities. And that was not necessarily a hard rule, but that was one of those 99% of the times, this is the rule that needs to be followed. There can always be exceptions. But the reason for that being is because it gave us a limitation that you never wanted to have a unit that you just dumped a bunch of special rules onto. Because I do feel that that's kind of one of those trappings that comes from design and development is you have a bunch of cool ideas for a unit and then you just pile them on, and eventually you're just going to bloat up units. I've made skirmish games in the past where that's the place for that, where you have a character that might have 5 to 10 different special rules and everything. But for units and this type of war game and everything, that was not the type of game we want this to be. So that the space was actually a purposely built-in design limitation. Now that did kind of come back to bite us a bit when with the having to put long and short range markers over there, because effectively that ate up one of those ability slots. Let's use that in giant air quotes. That might just be taken up by the fact that you have to declare a ranged for a ranged attack. So let's say you wanted to have a ranged guy who had 3 abilities that were all really cool. Well, you need to be able to mark somewhere on there that's long or short range. If you don't, then okay, now that guy needs to have 2 abilities, or his ranged attack needs to have an ability. So yes, in that shift, moving that icon over, we did gain some space there to technically put more abilities on there, but that doesn't necessarily mean we should or are going to. It's just the option is there.
Fantastic. And I think moving on now, not to the veterans. I'm saving those for last because those are kind of the all-star unit to me right now. But let's talk about these Dothraki Hrakkars. Now, you can only have 2 of these in your army, and you kind of revealed these at times. They'd been teased before, but now we see them in all their glory here. And you had once referred to them as guided missiles. Tell me a little bit more about this unit.
That's still pretty much their role. This is one of the things we showed this. Geez, I think we showed this at the original CMON Expo in May of 2020.
Yeah.
I want to say that's when we did it. I know it was back when back when the world was still much more in person than it is now. But it's just thinking back over the last like year, that's how much things were affected by the world state, was that these guys didn't even get to see their full release before they got updated for the 2021 set because of like COVID and all those things there. But enough talking about that. Let's talk about what we have here. So this is one of your like cheap options that you have here for Targaryens in general. And yeah, these guys are basically just a guided cruise missile. You have two ways of deploying them. You can stick them normally as you would if you want a cheap 5-point unit to get some extra activations out and deal some pretty significant damage with very little sustain though. Or you can use their outflank ability, which again is putting more importance on that maneuver zone and allowing these guys to come in and hit something from the flanks. And that is just a devastating hit because you're going to hit them with vicious 6 dice hitting on 3+, and then of course the flank bonuses, which are going to be a -1 to their defense, but then a further -1 to their morale test. So that vicious is going to instead turn into a -3. Oof. And this is ignoring the fact that, like, okay, say you crash into a side of a unit, they're probably going to be in prime position to get your other effects off, such as like overrun or any of those. So this unit can put a lot of work in.
Yeah, they look terrifying, and this is gonna be one that I'm excited to see on the table. Limited to 2. So is this gonna be like a standard kind of War Machines where you buy it and there's like 2 in a box? Oh, fantastic. Okay. So it's a super, that's like one of your like must buys then, right? Because you buy 1 box, you got your max cap, and you can start building lists around it. That's fantastic. But I know a lot of people are mostly excited for the Hrakkars, but I think the veterans, to me, I'm just like, wow. So these guys are now 8 points, so down from 10. They got a little bit more svelte. They lost a little bit of armor and a little bit of dice on their melee, but Swift Retreat is on them natively, and they've got this order quickfire. These guys are beasts. These are like true, like, this is what a veteran Dothraki looks like now. These are guys that are scary, nightmarish units. What's going on here? Why all these changes?
We spoke about this in previous just like generic visions articles, but when you start getting units into the 9 and 10 point category, they really, really have to start putting in a lot of work in order to justify being basically 2 activations worth of your army totals. And that's before even factoring in attachments. Like if I had a 10-point unit, the odds of me putting any form of attachment in there is just going to be almost 0, unless it's like a commander or something. Because let's say you put a 2-point attachment into a 10-point unit, that's 12 points. That means that thing has to put in the work of 2 6-point units. Oh, that unit has to be just from a balance perspective. It has to do so much to counteract that's just it's not going to be balanced. Or at least if it is, it's going to present a lot of problems. So a lot of the things that were in that kind of point category have been toned down. They're not entirely gone, but they are much rarer to see anything in that area. 8 points is kind of like, that's already on the higher end of what you'll see. And so in general here, the veterans received, they were toned down just like everything else was with the 2021 updates. So, their dice cap got taken down. Their straight up damage potential got reduced down a bit because before they had charging volley where they could make a range attack and charge in, deal some more. That became much more limited. And their role kind of changed around a bit, where now they're much more of a kind of a jack of all trades, can adapt to whatever battlefield position they need to type unit, where, they've got built-in Swift Retreat, which means you don't have to burn that card from your tactics deck for these guys to use. They've got quick fire, so you've got all kinds of synergies with their extra little maneuver here. So, and just naturally looking in, you've got 2 combinations there of cavalry and Swift Retreat. Their bow doesn't have any special keywords or anything, but given the just extreme maneuverability that these guys have, you're going to hit someone in the flanks. So you're already factoring in that -1 to defense and morale right there. But so here, this is 8 points. It's a very large investment in your army. Even then, you're talking about that these guys have to put out the same work as like a Hrakkar unit and then a 4-point NCU. So, they need to be scary. They need to, get work done. And, that's basically where we're sitting at. Now, imagine if you were looking at a 9 or 10-point unit, that situation is even more exasperated because of what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
Oh, also, these guys are now a great bunker for, Khal Drogo here.
Yes, I was just going to get to that. And that's so great too, right? Because that fits. And it's just like these guys have it all. Like these guys are, skillful fighters, and you can see that in the abilities they have. Like these are people that have seen some stuff They know how to fight, and that doesn't make them like incredibly tough per se. Like they've only got 5+ armor, but they can maneuver around and they can bring the hurt. And I just think that captures that veteran abilities, the veteran identity so well. These guys are like incredibly beastly. So big fan of how this unit's looking. I'm excited to try this one out on the table. And that brings us through all the units, the tactics cards. This is just kind of a preview. A lot of stuff that you see in the starter box plus the Dothraki Hrakkars. But this stuff looks fantastic. Really interesting opening up Targaryen play. And I think what's cool now is if you are a Targaryen player and maybe you're listening to this episode and you're kind of waiting with trepidation for what's to come, you got a preview here. But that means things like the Heroes box, your other commanders. There's going to be a lot of other surprises coming down the line and a lot of other ways to play the faction. Even just hearing you talk about that Barristan Selmy spoiler, that's a whole nother way of playing. That's so thematic, so fun. And so you might love the play style of Targaryens. And in this faction, there are like different sub styles of play, different ways you can maximize units to get like a very different feel on the table itself. And I think that's just like really compelling.
Yeah, I feel that, again, there's going to be a character for everyone in the Targaryens. Most other factions, they usually attract a certain type of mentality based on the factions. But I do feel with Targaryens that everyone's going to be able to find someone in there that they're like, oh man, that character, I don't care about any of the others, but they're really cool.
So we're going to wrap things up here. Thank you so much for tuning in, and tune in next week as we continue to explore the visions and the flames, and who knows what might be on the horizon, Michael, right?
I know.
You know? Oh,
and you know what, Chase? You know nothing.
All right. And hopefully maybe Fabio will find his way back to us. I don't know. But we'll be on the lookout. Everyone sees him. # where's Fabio? We miss you, man. And thanks so much for listening. And on the Facebook page where we post this, be sure to drop your painted units of your Targaryen miniatures so that we can comment on them on our next episode. And in the meantime, we'll put your miniatures on the table.